So you want to become a U.S. citizen. You probably know you've got to pass a civics test and an English test. But there's another hurdle, one that isn't about memorizing facts. It's way more subjective. And honestly, for a lot of people, it's the most stressful part of the whole process. So what is it? What's this requirement that feels less like a test and more like a judgment call? Well, it's a concept called good moral character. And understanding it is absolutely key to navigating the path to citizenship. Okay, so what in the world does good moral character actually mean? USCIS, that's the agency handling all this, defines it as behavior that stacks up to the standards of an average citizen in the community. Now, this isn't about being perfect. Nobody's expecting you to be a saint. It's really about things like, following the law, paying your taxes, taking care of your family responsibilities like child support, basically being a stand-up member of society. But how far back are they looking? I mean, are they digging through your entire life story? Nope. They focus on a very specific window of time. It's called the statutory period, and you can think of it as the time your conduct is really under the microscope. For the vast majority of applicants, that look-back period is 5 years. They want to see a consistent pattern of, good moral character for those 5 years leading right up to the moment you take that final oath of allegiance. Now, there is one major exception. If you happen to be married to a U.S. citizen, that period gets shortened to just 3 years. It's the same standard, just a tighter time frame. But here's the kicker. No matter if it's 3 or 5 years, the way this period is evaluated has completely changed. And that brings us to the real heart of this explainer, because this isn't some minor tweak to the rules. We're talking about a fundamental shift in philosophy, a whole new way of looking at what makes someone a good candidate for citizenship. As of August 15, 2025, a new policy, first put forward under the Trump administration, is in effect. And it tells USCIS officers to take a much broader, more holistic view. So what does that actually look like in practice? Well, the old system was kind of like a checklist. Did you commit any major crimes on the no-no list? No? Okay, you're probably fine. But the new system, it's more like a balance scale. It's this holistic review that looks at the totality of circumstances. So yeah, any negative actions go on one side of the scale, but now your positive contributions, things you do for your family, your community, your job, they officially get weighed on the other side. This gives the individual officer a whole lot more discretion. So let's talk about what can tip those scales. We'll start on the negative side, the things that can act as bars to proving you have good moral character. And these fall into two main buckets, the permanent ones and the temporary ones. And let's be really clear here. Some things are just deal breakers. Certain crimes will permanently, and I mean permanently, disqualify you from ever becoming a U.S. citizen. There's no coming back from them unless the conviction itself is somehow reversed. These permanent bars are for the most serious crimes you can imagine. We're talking about things like murder, what are called aggravated felonies, or being involved in persecution or torture. If any of these are on your record, it's an absolute lifelong barrier. End of story. Then you have what are called temporary or conditional bars. These are still really serious, but they don't necessarily mean a lifelong ban. If you do any of these things during that 3 or 5 year statutory period, your application is almost certainly going to be denied. We're talking about things like theft, a couple of DUIs, not paying your taxes, or lying to immigration officials. The key word, though, is temporary. If these things happened in the past, outside that statutory window, you might still have a shot, but only if you can prove you've truly been rehabilitated. And that brings us right back to the other side of that scale. Because with this new holistic review, it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff. It's become more important than ever to show the good stuff. This is basically the applicant's playbook for building a strong, positive case. And this quote, this really tells you everything you need to know about the thinking behind this whole shift. A USCIS spokesman basically said that U.S. citizenship is the, quote, gold standard and should only go to the world's best of the best. So they're not just looking for people who follow the rules, they're looking for people who actively contribute. It's a really high bar. So how do you prove these positive contributions? Well, it all comes down to evidence, to documentation. We're talking about getting your official IRS tax transcripts, showing proof of every child support payment, getting letters from your boss or volunteer organizations, anything that paints a picture of a responsible, involved person. And yeah, if you have those past mistakes, showing concrete evidence of rehabilitation is absolutely crucial. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second and look at the big picture. Why is this policy change such a big deal?
because we're not talking about a handful of people. This affects hundreds of thousands of applicants every single year who are trying to navigate this incredibly complex, life-altering process.
I mean, the scale is just massive. In fiscal year 2024, over 818,000 people became U.S. citizens. And while you see large numbers coming from places like Mexico and India, this policy really touches aspiring Americans from every single country on Earth.
At the end of the day, this is the real takeaway. This big shift to a holistic, totality of the circumstances review means individual immigration officers have more personal power to make a judgment call, and a lot of immigration attorneys are worried that this could lead to less consistency. You could have two people with very similar histories get two totally different outcomes, just depending on the officer who gets their file that day.
And that really leaves us with this big question to chew on. Does weighing both the good and the bad create a more just system, one that truly finds the best of the best? Or does swapping out clear rules for an officer's discretion just make the whole path to citizenship more of a gamble? It's the central debate at the heart of this whole new approach. Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for The Explainer.